I think looking back on that season, so last season, was one of the biggest misconceptions of the Indiana Fever. Like maybe it was like locker room stuff. I feel like early on,
Oh
it's
my
like, they know,
gosh, oh my
not to put words
gosh,
in your
there
mouth,
was so much locker room talk, and
everybody I talked to were like, we vibe, we're good.
I was like, what are we talking about? Like, it's so easy for people to just make all these assumptions. Some people are like, oh my gosh, her body language, she was not happy. She hates this entire squad. I don't know. Sometimes when you have a bad game personally, that takes a toll on you.
Yeah,
it's not that you don't like the team. It's not you, but that takes a toll on you. Every single night we come out, we want to play good. And so like all the time there were locker room talks. I forgot what was the conversation one time. I woke up from my nap, getting ready to go to pregame. People are like, oh, they hate each other. They hate each other. We walked in the locker room. We're like, girl, you good?
Yeah.
I'm like, I just woke up. I can tell you what's happening right now, but all I know is we about to hoop. At 7 p.m., we got a game.
Listen to the absolute absurdity in her voice. Listen to the genuine confusion of a professional athlete waking up from a pre-game nap only to discover that the internet has decided her team is tearing itself apart from the inside. For an entire year, the sports world was completely captivated by a phantom war, a ghost story written by commentators, perpetuated by social media algorithms, and swallowed whole by a public desperate for a tragic downfall. They looked at the Indiana Fever, they looked at the unprecedented, blinding supernova that is Caitlin Clark, and they made a collective decision that this story required a villain. But they did not look for that villain in the opposing locker rooms. They did not look for it in the grueling travel schedules or the brutal physicality of the league. Instead, they tried to conjure a monster out of thin air, planting it directly inside the sanctuary of her own team. They wanted you to believe that the very women who bled with her on the hardwood, who shared the grueling early morning film sessions, absolutely despised her. They turned every missed high five into a psychological thriller. They brought in body language experts to dissect the way a towel was thrown on the bench. They painted a masterpiece of toxic isolation, wrapping Caitlin Clark in a narrative of complete and utter loneliness. But the reality? The reality is a story of ancient chaos. A dark legend of a brotherhood, a sisterhood, forged in the absolute deepest shadows of media manipulation. To truly comprehend the terrifying force that Caitlin Clark has become in this current landscape of April 2026, you have to drag yourself back through the wreckage she had to survive to get here. When she first stepped onto a WNBA court, she was not afforded the grace of a normal rookie transition. She was an anomaly, a glitch in the established matrix of the sport. And the old guard of the league reacted the way empires always react to sudden, uncontrollable shifts in power, with overwhelming resistance. The legends who had built this league, who had fought for relevance in empty arenas for decades, looked at this rookie carrying the financial weight of the entire sport on her shoulders, and a quiet, bitter resentment began to seep into the national dialogue. You had iconic voices like Cheryl Swoops consistently moving the goalposts, attempting to invalidate the phenomenon. When Caitlin broke records in college, they said it was because of an extra year of eligibility. When she arrived in the pros and immediately started dissecting defenses with passes that defied basic physics, they shifted the narrative to her defense, her turnovers, her emotional expressions on the court. It was a relentless, suffocating barrage of psychological warfare. The media constructed a double standard so towering and so hypocritical that it felt suffocating. They would place microphones in front of a 22-year-old point guard and demand that she solve the deeply entrenched systemic racial and cultural divides of the United States in a post-game press conference. Yet they would remain completely silent when other players navigated their own controversies. She was expected to be a messiah, a marketing executive, a punching bag, and a silent martyr all at once. Now, she was expected to absorb brutal physical hits on the court, smile for the cameras, and apologize for the sheer magnitude of the shadow she cast over everyone else. The media desperately wanted to break her. They wanted the dramatic collapse. They wanted the tragedy. But Caitlin Clark did not give them a tragedy. She gave them a master plan. And the first phase of that master plan was finding her enforcer. This brings us to the most violent, unapologetic, and fiercely loyal dynamic currently operating in professional basketball, the terrifying synergy between Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham. If Caitlin is the grandmaster, the architect mapping out the geometric variables of the court at a processing speed that leaves veterans dizzy, Sophie is the blunt force trauma necessary to protect the architect's vision. The media, in their desperation to isolate Caitlin, deliberately ignored the fortress that was being constructed around her. In this league, rookies are initiated through pain, Opposing teams made it their explicit, unwritten mission to put Caitlin on the hardwood as frequently and as violently as the referees would allow. They wanted to test her jaw, test her ribs, test her will to exist in their space. But for every cheap shot, for every aggressive hip check away from the ball, there was a consequence. And that consequence was Sophie Cunningham. Sophie operates with a specific kind of aggressive baroque swagger that completely alters the atmospheric pressure of the arena. She is not just a perimeter shooter. She is the psychological bodyguard of the franchise. When you study the forensic breakdown of the Fever's footage over the last year, you do not just see a basketball team. You see a pack of wolves protecting their apex predator. Sophie recognized almost immediately that for Caitlin to perform her dark arts on the court, for her to see the passing lanes that do not exist to the mortal eye, she needed an absolute guarantee of safety. They forged an unspoken, unbreakable blood pact. Caitlin manipulates the defense, drawing 3 bodies to the perimeter before whipping a no-look pass to the corner, feeding Sophie for a wide-open 3. In return, Sophie ensures that if any opposing guard decides to walk over Caitlin after a foul, they will have to look Sophie dead in the eyes and answer for it. It is a beautiful, brutal reciprocity. The Leches squad, the nickname bestowed upon the trio of Caitlin, Sophie, and Lexi, is not just a cute internet joke. And it is a tactical military unit designed to completely demoralize the opposition. But the story of the Indiana Fever's dominance cannot be told without descending into the ghost story of the Final Four. We have to examine the profound psychological labyrinth that is the relationship between Caitlin Clark and Aliyah Boston. Consider the sheer, unadulterated trauma of what Caitlin inflicted upon Aliyah's collegiate dreams. Dropping 40 points on someone's head on the grandest stage of their life, completely dismantling their championship aspirations single-handedly, is not an event that simply washes away. It leaves a permanent scar. It is the exact type of historic humiliation that breeds bitter, generational grudges in the realm of professional sports. Then when the draft lottery sealed their fates and forced these 2 opposing forces into the exact same locker room in Indiana, the executives in the league office were bracing for a catastrophic collision of egos. The media had their headlines pre-written, salivating at the prospect of an alpha dog war. Yet Aliyah Boston executed a move of profound emotional intelligence. She took that heavy, suffocating baggage, walked directly up to the woman who had ruined her collegiate fairy tale and turned it into a weapon of mass camaraderie. She looked Caitlin in the eye and essentially said, "I am still profoundly upset that you did what you did to us on that night. But since we are wearing the same jersey now, let's go make the rest of the league feel that exact same pain." In that single, vulnerable, hilariously blunt exchange, the tension completely evaporated. What rose from the ashes of that college rivalry is a basketball telepathy that borders on the supernatural. The pick and roll executed by Clark and Boston is no longer a standard offensive set. It is an inevitable execution. Aliyah recently pulled back the curtain on this dark magic, admitting that she does not even listen for a verbal play call anymore. She does not look at the bench. She simply watches Caitlin's eyes. That is the zenith of basketball intelligence meeting its exact mirror image. When Caitlin comes off a screen, the opposing defense is instantly plunged into a state of absolute paralysis. If the defense sags back even half a step, giving her a sliver of daylight, Caitlin inks her arms to ask for it. The rest of the league is playing a rudimentary game of checkers, while these 2 are playing a high-speed game of cheated. However, to truly appreciate the monstrous entity that has been unleashed upon the WNBA in 2026, you must understand the absolute darkness of 2025. Last year was supposed to be the great coronation. It mutated into a nightmare of physical limitations. A severe, lingering groin and leg injury sidelined Caitlin for a massive, devastating chunk of the season. She was agonizingly restricted to a mere 13 games. For an athlete whose entire neurological makeup is tied to perpetual motion, to the relentless, chaotic pace of pushing the basketball down the floor at warp speed, being anchored to the sideline in civilian clothes is a unique, agonizing form of psychological torture. As she sat, the noise from the outside world grew deafening. The media intent. The commentators who never truly believed in her underlying substance began writing names simply could not withstand the grueling physical reality of the professional game. They suggested that the Clark effect was nothing more than WNBA had already figured out and dismantled. While the world was busy dancing on her grave, Caitlin Clark was disappearing into the shadows of rehabilitation. She refused to give the media the perverse satisfaction of watching her struggle. She vanished into the sterile, echoing confines of the gym. And this is the chapter of the documentary that the casual fans never see. The brutal, unglamorous, agonizing isolation of recovery. It is waking up in the pitch black of 4 a.m., enduring grueling physical therapy sessions that push the body to the absolute brink of tears, the agonizingly slow process of rebuilding microscopic muscle memory, the freezing shock of the ice baths, and the deafening silence of an empty arena. While the rest of the WNBA moved forward without her, and the Indiana Fever were forced to fundamentally alter their entire offensive identity just to survive, Caitlin was sitting in the dark, obsessively watching game tape. She was analyzing her own microscopic weaknesses, studying the tendencies of the defenders who thought they had escaped her, and boiling with a quiet, terrifying, cold-blooded anger. And here lies the greatest, most devastating irony of that lost season. They forged them into an unbreakable weapon of mass destruction. Without Caitlin's hyperspeed creation, they learned how to suffer together, how to bleed together, and how to win ugly. So, ask yourself this terrifying question. What happens when you take a roster that has just spent an entire grueling year mastering the brutal art of slow, grinding, physical half-court survival, and you suddenly inject a 100% healthy, mathematically impossible point guard back into the administrators, publicly and hilariously calling them out for heavily editing her photos and slapping weird pictures of her own existence? The media machinery literally does not know how to handle this evolved version of her. They are desperate for the drama, begging for a soundbite. But she is giving them absolutely. Nick is circulating on the morning talk shows. She looks entirely through them, her eyes completely devoid of interest. The locker room has become the half-court logo. The shot is going up, and it is going in. But let us play devil's advocate. Let us say an opposing team manages to execute a defensive miracle and actually stops the fast break. They force Indiana to slow down and run a half-court set. But this is where the dark lessons of the 2025 injury season stay, orchestrated by a basketball savant who possesses an eidetic memory and never forgets a single slight. Every team that took cheap shots at her ribs during her rookie initiation, every veteran player that talked down to her in the press conference anymore. She is playing for total, scorched earth retribution. The dynamic has fundamentally flipped. The hunted has officially, undeniably become the hunter. The entire league spent a year trying to figure out how to mentally and physically break Caitlin Clark, and all they managed to accomplish was teaching her just a media phenomenon or a fleeting trend. It is a clinical, undeniable, horrifying reality, and for the rest of the basketball world, the clock has officially run out.